Coming up on tonight's UAP UFO news show, the release of Kona Blue. What's all this buzz about drones? Congress's classified UFO briefing. Did the latest FOIA request tell too much? And Unhidden's white paper. Hey there, beautiful souls. It's your girl, Allie, and we're back at it again for another episode of UAP Society's weekly UAP and UFO news show. We've combed through this past week's most exciting, intriguing, and informative happenings, and I'm stoked to get started. I'm riding solo tonight as my partner in crime, Justin, isn't feeling well, and apologies for the video being late this week. We were out of town and unable to record. But have no fear, the news is here. You're in for a treat as we bring you the latest and greatest UAP and UFO news. So find your seats, strap in, and get ready to go on a galactic roller coaster ride with us. Please consider subscribing if you like this content, and while you're at it, drop us a like. We would definitely appreciate that. It helps the algorithm. All right, first up, the release of Kona Blue. Earlier this week, Arrow released a declassified document featuring a proposed program called Kona Blue that's caused quite the stir in the UFO community. Let's hear from UAP Society's Captain Chris Lato as he goes over the highlights of this 56-page document and hear his take on what it all means.
The Kona Blue program was a proposed Department of Homeland Security DHS initiative. It aimed to cover the retrieval and exploitation of non-human biological materials. We'll go through this proposal in detail, but need to say up front that it was never officially approved or formally established as a program, so it was just a proposal. It was mentioned as part of the Department of Defense's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office Part 1 review. Interestingly, it was delayed. Kona Blue was originally declassified in July of 2023, 2 days after David Grush's hearings, but they haven't released it till now, just till this past week in April, mid-April 2024. It seems like Arrow has definitely held on to this document and not released it until it was advantageous to their PR. Kona Blue was originally linked to the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Application Program, to ASAP, and the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. Both of those programs were managed by the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. So after those programs were canceled, Kona Blue was conceived to carry on the investigations. The proposal suggested that DHS, Department of Homeland Security, continue the work started by DIA, focusing on investigating and analyzing advanced aerospace technologies, specifically non-human biologics, to house non-human biologics. However, it was never funded or equipped with any materials, and it remained a speculative proposal without physical evidence or implementation, according to Politico. So in a broader context, the Arrow's review aimed to debunk theories of any secret UAP programs. That's why they delayed the release till after their Part 1 review. Arrow clarified that many UFO sightings over the years were misidentifications of mundane phenomena or misunderstood national security projects. Although they still never mentioned Nimitz, they never mentioned any of the East Coast engagements with all the drones and drone incursions that we've seen over Langley. They didn't mention Aguadilla as well. So they haven't mentioned any of the actual real cases that we're interested in. They didn't mention Stephenville. That's where F-16s actually launched, and there's detailed radar data over Stephenville. They also still have yet to release any nuclear information. All of that will supposedly be coming in Part 2. Part 1 was basically just to say there's nothing to see here, and they did include Kona Blue. Wow, interesting story. I wish it was approved. I mean, that would be just an amazing investigative effort. That's exactly what our government should be doing to actually research this, if real. It's exactly what they should be doing. But it looks like, yeah, it came from those specific senators, Harry Reid, Inouye, and Stevens, really motivated by Reid and Lieberman to make this happen. After OSAP and ATIP were shut down, they asked Department of Homeland Security to take it over as advanced threats against the United States. If we look today, you look on the West Coast, you have all the drone incursions. Jeremy Corbell I covered on this channel, the Omaha, etc. Onto ships. You have the Nimitz engagement in 2004. Again, that was off the West Coast. Then you have the East Coast engagements with Ryan Graves. In just December 2023, there were incursions at Langley Air Force Base. Again, I covered that on this channel, mysterious drone swarms. And that's where Ryan Graves said in Whiskey 72, they had the encounters with unknown UAPs. again, the dark or gray cube inside of a sphere. So it doesn't sound so outlandish that actually Department of Homeland Security would be involved in protecting these, although it is up to the Air Force to actually defend the borders. Interesting, I thought as well, was the mention of the experimental sites. So they mentioned, they didn't, not by name, but by location, 15 years, Skinwalker Ranch, owned by Bigelow Aerospace. They've been studying that for 15 years. And the consciousness studies to do remote transfer of matter, and dematerialization of matter. So not just communication and information finding, but actually moving stuff across the space-time barrier. They said that is amazing. So if you think that maybe consciousness is the future of physics, right? Could we actually go to a point where you can transfer matter across any space or time? Then that would mean UAPs could be time travelers, as many people have said. The other part I thought interesting on that is what Michael Herrera said, is that these advanced aerospace vehicles could be controlled by humans. So basically, some sort of consciousness link that actually allows humans to control advanced materials. So actually control these advanced aerospace vehicles, if the stories are actually true, Bob Lazar, etc. So either way, just an amazing proposal.
Very, very interesting stuff. And in the full length version of that video, Chris goes over the entire document in detail. So if you'd like to check that out, please go to the video description box below for that link. And of course, as always, all of the sources of the things that we feature in the show are going to be in that video description box in the order that they appear. We put a lot of work into that, so please make sure to check that out while you're here. All right, so this program, Kona Blue, touches on so many different things and sheds light onto so many different things. It's a little wild. I mean, they're talking about consciousness. They're talking about remote viewing, time travel, possible portals. They're validating Skinwalker Ranch, referring to that as the property that they've studied for 15 years and would like to replicate. They're also shedding light on craft recovery, reverse engineering, the existence of NHI. I mean, all of these things are being put on the table when you think about what's being spoken about here. And, you know, my question is like, what programs were proposed that did get approved that we don't even know about? You know, Kona was proposed and not approved, and we're hearing about it, but which programs did make the cut and are currently underway happening at this moment that we have no clue about? That's where my mind goes. Another place that I would like to take us to mentally is the fact that Stephen Greer has mentioned something about this in the past. He's mentioned about nefarious government programs, calling crafts in, and then physically hacking into their systems to take these crafts down. I know it sounds a little wild, but I did manage to find the video that I had in my head of where he said that so I could share it with you guys. So I'm going to play that now and let's take a listen, see what you think.
The documentary, the information in there is pretty mind-blowing with regards to weapons at the North Pole, secret reverse engineered craft, even covert drug running programs with unknown UAPs.
Well, worse than the covert drug running programs are the human trafficking going on by these UAP systems. And those are the ones that when Michael Herrera, the Marine, saw that, the crate, it turns out, a man surfaced and came to the meeting that you were at, who is very high up in the system. And he has been involved actively for years in programs where they go to impoverished areas and basically kidnap people to put them into these experimental programs, and they're trafficking them often on the man-made UAPs, like that big circular one that Herrera saw. Now, sometimes they're trafficked conventionally with helos, helicopters, and what have you, but those are used in UFO tracking programs. This is bizarre stuff. And they basically turn these people into bio machines interfacing with technology and with certain drugs to make something happen that I refer to as hacking into the guidance and control systems of ET vehicles and bringing them in so we can hit them, kill them. And it sounds like science fiction. It's not. I've known about this since the 90s, and I don't know how far back that program goes, but the man that's involved, who has been running some of these operations intimately, I have been at his facilities. I've been in his chopper. I've flown over the sites where this is happening. And these are called P3 assets. And the P3 assets are the people trained to be able to do this.
Pretty wild concepts to consider, but I mean, would you be surprised if this was really going on? I don't know. I don't think I would be. And there's also another point that I wanted to bring up, and that is the fact that what Dr. Greer says reminds me a lot about Tony Rodriguez and his human trafficking and secret space program manipulation of consciousness experience. For those of you who don't know, Tony Rodriguez is somebody who was stolen as a kid. This is his story. He said he was stolen as a child, sold to a government program, and then rented or contracted out. He was drugged to enhance his psychic abilities and used by South American drug and weapon runners to ensure the safety of their missions. So basically, they took him along on their missions, they drugged him up, and then used his psychic abilities to let them know whether their mission was going to be fruitful or if it was going to be their demise. So that's pretty wild when you think about it. But his stories gets even wilder than that, because that's just what happened to him on Earth. That's not even touching his experiences out in space and with the 20 and back program and all of that. I think I've mentioned this on the show before. So if you'd like to check out Tony Rodriguez, I definitely recommend that, as I have in the past. But let's get back on track, because we've covered a lot of ground and we've given you guys a lot to think about. But in that first clip with Chris, you know, he mentioned drones infiltrating Langley Air Force Base back in December. But this week, drones were a hot topic again. So let's move on to our next story. So what's all this buzz about drones? According to a tweet from D. Dean Johnson, Congressman said, quote, Langley had to close down, end quote, because of unmanned aircraft systems, or drones. At a hearing before the U.S. House of Representatives Armed Service Committee today, 4/17/24, Representative Rod Whitman said, quote, we saw recently a very disturbing trend at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, where because of a large number of UASs that were in that airspace, Langley had to close down just to make sure they were able to defend the operations that were going on there, end quote. Secretary of the Air Force Frank Kendall responded. Let's take a look at that embedded video now real quick.
You, Mr. Whitman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Secretary Kendall, I'd like to begin with you. The U.S. Air Force base budget and then the UCOM unfunded requirements list both call for additional counter small UAS capability at U.S. Air Force installations. As I see things unfolding, we see counter small UAS and really loitering munitions not having much distinction. They are becoming the same thing. We saw recently a very disturbing trend at Langley Air Force Base, where because of a large number of UASs that were in that airspace, Langley had to close down just to make sure that we were able to defend the operations that were going on there. As I watch how missions are developing, you see the Army Missile Defense Mission, you see the Air Force Air Base Air Defense Mission, and it looks like to me that there's a lot of commonalities there. Can you give me an idea about how do you look at those different requirements and who's responsible for what mission? Are there clear lines of distinction there? And do you think that based upon where we are today, are our Air Force bases adequately protected?
We have a wide range of threats to our air bases. They vary by theater quite a bit. Different in the Middle East or in Europe or in the Pacific. In the Pacific in particular, what China's been acquiring is a variety of missiles, precision missiles, ballistic and cruise and hypersonic, designed to attack our air bases. And that's the threat that really drives us more than anything else right now. In the Middle East and to some extent in Europe, we're faced with small UAVs more. We have to deal with all of these. The way the department is approaching this is that the Army is generally the lead for research and development on small UAV problem, and we're participating in that. We contribute to that in our full-fledged members. And we are funding some improvements to our air bases for security of that. I was just at several of our Middle East air bases where we have systems deployed today because of that threat. As you go up the chain a little bit in the threat and start worrying about cruise and ballistic missiles, then systems like Patriot come into play. What we need, and there's a large study that's been going on for well over a year now, led by the Army that we're participating in, to try to come to an optimal solution for air-based defense against a whole range of threats. What we need in particular is a highly cost-effective way to engage those cruise and ballistic missiles and those hypersonics. Yeah. And there's some promising technologies in development which we think have potential to do that. We will have to make some decisions in the department about force structure and what our priorities are to acquire those. But I think it's an important part of air-based resilience that we have to address. Our whole concept of operation in the Pacific is called agile combat employment, which assumes that we don't stay on a single base to absorb missile attacks. We move around to different bases and make it harder for the other guy. But you still need defenses, and you need defenses that can be where you're going to be to be effective. All our wargaming says that's a necessity. So we're not where we need to be yet, but we're on the path, hopefully, to get there.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And in response, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher K. Mellon, replied, "Yes, one of a growing string of similar incidents in which we have been unable to identify or engage these unmanned vehicles. They are not even trying to conceal their presence, yet operate with impunity for weeks in restricted airspace to the point fighters were relocated from Langley to other bases. If the Air Force can't control the air over Langley, how can they control the air over Washington? I encourage people to go to the War Zones website and search these terms: drones in Guam, or drones in Colorado, or drones in Palo Verde, or drones in FAA or Arizona or Navy, and see what you find. Most people think drones are just a problem for countries overseas. Not true. We have a big problem here in the US and still no clue where these things are coming from or why." So just recently, this past weekend, there was a lot of things going on about drones. And, there's the war in Israel, and they claimed that they were able to shoot down 99% of the drones over the Middle East. But how can we do that if we can't even control the drones over our own military bases? I don't know. Something just doesn't seem to be adding up. It seems like all these drones are just popping over our air bases and hanging out over the nuclear warheads and doing things to those. And nobody knows what they are or have ever retrieved any of those or have any information about whose they are or what they are or where they came from, or most importantly, what their intentions are. So I don't know. That's just a little wild concept I think you guys should think about. In addition to that, Ross Coulthart appeared on News Nation this week with the video evidence of that event from Langley Air Force Base, based off of an interview he did on his Reality Check YouTube show. Let's check that out next.
A recent drone activity over U.S. military airspace is fueling questions on what's being done to monitor such aircraft. U.S. Air Force officials confirming several unmanned drones flew over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia back in December. It's been brought up at congressional hearings twice just this month alone. In one exchange, Senator Mark Kelly questioned the Joint Chiefs chairman on why and how these drones got so close to sensitive military airspace. Take a listen.
One of the things we have to continue to work on is to continue to understand the technology that's moving forward and then move at the same pace as it was highlighted. We do have to move faster. And so it's an area that we collectively have to continue to work on, not only here in defense here in the United States, but also at our forward locations where we have many of our service members deployed.
And this issue is the topic of the latest episode of one of our new podcasts. And right now, the link to Reality Check with Ross Coulthart is live. Just take out your phone, scan this QR code right here at the bottom of your screen, or visit News Nation's website or our YouTube page to get that link. But joining me now is Reality Check host and News Nation special correspondent Ross Coulthart. Ross, good to have you this morning. In your latest episode, you interview a witness to the mysterious drones that flew over Langley Air Force Base. Let's take a listen to what he had to say first.
Kind of confirmed to me that it was Langley when I would sometimes see a searchlight that would start flashing from the ground and kind of wave back and forth, never really focusing on any of them as they went past, but just kind of like just waving back and forth. The orbs, I would say, looked about car-sized. I mean, just from that distance. And they kept a very steady pace until they got over that location, in which they would start hovering over the base.
Yeah, so Ross, the government says they don't know the origin of these drones, but you see that video we played there to the right-hand side of the screen. What's your take on who could be sending drones over U.S. airspace?
Well, firstly, good morning, Marky. The word they're using is drones, but there's no evidence that these are what we would call commercial or military drones. The witness that I interviewed, Jonathan Butner, he was close enough to see for sure whether there were propeller blades or any kind of propulsion system that was keeping these drones hovering in the air. And as he says, this was car-sized. These were large orange orb objects with no visible means of propulsion. And this isn't just happening at Langley Air Force Base. These incidents are happening all across key military installations and particularly nuclear facilities all across the United States. And I know the Air Force likes to use the euphemism of drones because that offers a palatable possible alternative, that it might be a foreign adversary. But there has been no evidence presented of any foreign adversary being able to deploy drones in what at Langley Air Force Base is one of the most sensitive Air Force bases on the East Coast. This is where we've got F-22 Raptors. This is the forward defense for Washington, D.C. This is a very, very important military base, and it's quite clear it's not possible to stop these objects from coming into that very, very sensitive military airspace.
Yeah, I know people have floated the idea of this being, sent from China or Russia especially after we saw that Chinese spy balloon just last year. This latest episode also talks about how the Mexican drug cartels are using drones over our southern border. Are drones changing the way American enemies are spying on us?
They are. Indeed, they are. I think the estimation from Northcom's commander has been that there's 1,000 drone incursions alone across the southern border of the United States, particularly from crime cartels in Mexico. And the alarming thing is that there are admissions that these drones are technologies far beyond what the United States is capable of producing itself. They're using highly advanced technology, obviously, to bring in illicit materials, perhaps weapons, perhaps drugs, and this is largely unregulated and unmonitored. It's a huge concern, and we interview Congressman Glenn Grothman in the story, who talks about this as a major issue of concern. What he also raises is concerns, frankly, that we need to ensure that there's greater reporting of anomalous objects that are seen in our skies so that these things are brought to the attention of authorities, because we have a crazy situation where reporting these objects is so stigmatized that pilots don't feel comfortable about coming forward. And there's a laudatory piece of legislation that the congressman is pushing with his colleagues in the House, which will essentially allow pilots to get protections to know that they can come forward to the FAA and other agencies and know that they're not going to suffer harassment or intimidation in their job for coming forward and telling the truth about what they're seeing.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Are these drones? Are they UAPs? Are they human piloted or controlled, I should say? Are they controlled by some other source? Who knows? I guess that's yet to be determined. Let us know in the comment box down below what you think these sources or the source of these drones are, if they even are drones at all. But some things that I wanted to point out from that video is that Ross Coulthart was talking about, that people should be able to report sightings without stigma or without fear of ridicule. And I just wanted to remind everybody that Ryan Graves has his, Americans for Safe Aerospace reporting system that people can use. And also we covered the Glenn Grothman bill a few shows ago. For those of you that may have missed that, he's proposing a new bill to make it easier and safer for pilots and other people to report UAP sightings. And his whole main deal is that it's going to be able to be done without stigma or fear of ridicule or fear of having your certificates or your licenses taken away. So I'm all for that. I think that's a great idea. And I'm really glad that there are people like Ryan Graves and Congressman Glenn Grothman who are putting these types of things into play so that there is a safe space to go to report what you see. And speaking of congressional efforts, let's roll into the next story. Congress's classified UFO briefing. This past week, Congress met again to speak about UAPs and to learn new things, hopefully, but let's hear it from two of them themselves to see if that's actually what happened. On April 17th, Askapol UAPs tweeted this. Post-SCIF briefing. Robert Garcia reiterates his call for another public UAP hearing. So it sounds like he's requesting another one. And then in addition to that, Tim Burchett was featured on News Nation to give his opinion on how it all went down. Let's check out those two clips now.
Sounds like I got two questions for you. Sure. So first is, you had your question answered, but did it seem generally like, from the lawmakers in the room, they were satisfied with some of what they were hearing?
Well, look, you could have gotten a question after the meeting totally satisfied.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I just want to have more public hearings. I think public hearings are really important. Classified briefings are great. We've asked for more public hearings. It's not a decision that those of us in the minority can make. This is, quite frankly, on the majority. It's on the Republicans. So we need more hearings. We've already made that request in oversight, so we're going to continue to make that request.
Can you tell me where you think you are with that?
I've made that request in letters. in person. I'm not sure how many more times we can request it, so it's really their decision. But certainly I'd like to see more public hearings.
Welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. Today, lawmakers on Capitol Hill received a classified briefing on unidentified anomalous phenomenon, commonly known as UFOs. It comes as lawmakers continue to push for transparency from the Pentagon. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Tim Burchett. He attended that classified briefing. Congressman, great to see you and talk with you as always. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. So it's classified. I know you can't get into details. We get that. We understand it. But after being in that briefing, and now you're out of it, were you satisfied with what you heard?
No, it's always compartmentalized. We can't get to certain things. I don't really think of these people are lying. I think there's a lot of arrogance that kind of whirls around this so-called intelligence community. But what they do is they've compartmentalized it so that each department, they can only answer your question up to a certain point, and you can't get everybody in the skiff at the same time to answer the question. So no, I was almost falling asleep in the meeting. It was just so mundane,
He looks tired.
And boring, and a lot of the things they told us, they explained some things that went on that were just like, okay, well then why are you having to tell us this in the skiff? Why can't you tell the American public that? And it's just
so do you think
complete disinformation. Go ahead.
Do you think your time spent on this, because there's a lot of time that you and the rest of the UAP caucus have spent to try to get answers, and every time I speak with you, Congressman, when you go to these classified briefings, you walk out and you're disappointed. And I wonder if you think that this is a waste of time. Do you feel that there's a cover-up going on, something in between? What is it?
Yeah, I think there's a cover-up. There's tens of millions of dollars that we spend investigating these things. We've had departments tell us that they have recovery units, but yet they won't release full reports. Everything's covered up. Your reports look like somebody shot it with a 12-gauge shotgun. So of course I think there's a cover-up. What it is, I don't know. I've said many times, it's not about the little green men or the flying saucers. It's about what the heck are they spending all this dadgum money on, and why won't they release it? That's the real questions that need to be asked. Until we have a commander-in-chief that'll release them, I don't think we're going to get them.
Why do you think there's a cover-up?
A lot of reasons. If say it is extraterrestrial, there's a lot of money to be made from somebody else's technology that you don't have to spend any money to get. And there might be the fact they don't understand what's going on, and there might be the fact that it's just plain arrogance, and they don't think we deserve it. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with high-ranking officials that have told me that America really can't handle this stuff, Congressman. We really just need to be real careful about it. And it's not their position to tell me who or what I can handle. We're Americans. We ought to be able to take it. Give it to us. I'm tired of it.
Right. That part.
Real quick, Congressman, what's next?
More hearings.
Well, hopefully we'll have some hearings about this. They're just trying to run the clock out, which we said they were going to do. And we'll keep, as long as some of us are still in Congress, they don't run us off, we'll continue trying to get the answers. And look, I just want transparency. That's what you and the media ought to ask for. That's what the taxpayers should ask for. Just give me some dadgum transparency.
Congressman Tim Burchett, UAP caucus, we got to leave it there. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you again soon.
Give me some daggum transparency. I am definitely with you on that, Burchett. Definitely with you on that. So it sounds like neither one of them were impressed. Both of them looked unimpressed, basically. They looked really tired. They looked really frustrated. But at least they're still in the game. They're still pushing. They're still going to these meetings. They're still requesting more. They're still requesting us to request more. So follow up with that. Do what you got to do. And let's make this happen together. But speaking of transparency, we may have gotten just a little bit too much of that in our next story. Did the latest FOIA request tell too much? This past Thursday, Dan Zetterstrom tweeted this. New document released via Department of Defense fave FOIA outlet blackvault.com regarding contact with Grush and his clear unaddressed concerns about DoD Aero alludes to ongoing beef between Grush and Kirkpatrick since 2015. What document is he talking about? And what does it have to do with too much transparency, you might be asking? Well, to give a little bit more clarity and to shed some light on this story, we have another tweet to look at. On Twitter, Christopher K. Mellon says, to my surprise, parts of a conversation I had with Dr. Kirkpatrick on Signal were recently made public via a FOIA request. These messages simply relate to my effort to facilitate a meeting between Arrow and Dave Grush at Dr. Kirkpatrick's request. To which Lou Elizondo then replied by saying this, Chris, I wonder when did DoD authorize Kirkpatrick to use the Signal app for official U.S. business and correspondence? You and I would have been crucified for doing that while we were in the government. And when did they allow personal identifiable info of U.S. citizens to be released, contrary to Privacy Act of 1974? I guess it's more of the same regarding rules that apply to thee, but not to me. So it looks like, yet again, Kirkpatrick Pants is pissing people off and acting out of pocket. So what they're talking about is that Christopher Mellon was having a conversation with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick on an app called Signal, and that correspondence of those text messages, as I will show you here, were part of this FOIA document. So not only was there, the normal FOIA stuff that comes back, but also screenshots basically of the Signal conversation. And it looks like Lou Elizondo is saying that if he did that when he was in the government, it would have been his ass. So I don't know what's going on now. This seems to be a little bit sloppy. The blackfault.com is definitely going hard with the FOIA requests, and people seem to be eating them up when we get them back. So what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments section below. And last but not least, Unhidden's white paper. On April 11th, Unhidden, which is a charity with the aim of promoting mental health and well-being around the NHI topic, tweeted this. Next week, Unhidden will be publishing its white paper on the impact of exceptional experiences and disclosure on mental health and well-being. This will cover the psychosocial implications for people who see exceptional things that they cannot explain and contain 5 key recommendations, largely for the UK government. Unhidden is a mental health and well-being charity established in summer 2023 to campaign for better support for people who have had exceptional experiences and to encourage a better, kinder disclosure process. Now, in the past, we've already mentioned how retired U.S. Navy's Sean Cahill, Alex Dietrich, and Tim Gallaudet are all official ambassadors for this organization. But now, let's hear from Unhidden's founder and chairman, John Priestland himself, in this next clip from their new YouTube channel.
My name's John Priestland, and I'm the founder and chairman of Unhidden. We've come a huge way over the past 20 years in terms of mental health in the UK. People's lived experience is now respected and believed in a way that it simply wasn't just a few years ago. Except, that is, for people who report seeing exceptional things that they can't explain, where stigma and ridicule often remains. Unhidden is encouraging better conversations around UAPs, with friends and family, with colleagues, and, if you need to, with your doctor. We invite the UK government to become part of that conversation. It's time for better care and support for experiences, and it's time for the UK government to play its part.
Looking at their website, unhidden.org, we can see that they've really taken the time to think this through and even come up with 5 recommendations for UK government to consider putting into practice. Let's check them out now. First up, it says the UK government should publicly acknowledge that UAP sightings and other forms of exceptional experiences are real and that people who have experienced them may need care and support. Number 2, the NHS, or National Healthcare System, and professional bodies should develop guidance for health and social care professionals to make it easier for them to consult patients presenting with exceptional experiences in a non-judgmental and evidence-based manner. Number 3, the UK government should provide credible information on the UAP topic to the public, and the media needs to play its part by reporting newsworthy stories about UAPs fairly and properly. Number 4, the UK government should commission multidisciplinary research that considers both the medical and psychological aspects of how the general population might react to UAP disclosure and identifies the most vulnerable individuals, groups, and communities, and what sort of help and support might be beneficial. And then lastly, number 5, the UK government should develop a plan for UAP disclosure that brings together multiple branches of government and community groups as a single, open, shared endeavor, putting people and their well-being first. This needs to be done in a way that builds trust. I think those are 5 very good points, 5 very good recommendations that the UK government, or any government really, should put into play. And I'm excited to see that we have 3 retired US Navy people that are ambassadors of this program. And I'm curious to see if anybody else joins, and to see if maybe the United States comes up with its own version of this Unhidden charity as well. Mental health is super important. It is important to take care of yourself. Self-love is not selfish. And just make sure that you guys are paying attention to the cues and the clues that your body are giving you, and take care of yourselves. And that concludes this week's UAP Society's weekly UAP and UFO news show. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. And while you're here, do us a favor, smash that like button, click subscribe, ring our little notification bell, drop a lovely comment down below, and share this video with your family and friends to help us spread the good word. Let's raise the collective consciousness together in unity. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Much love, peace, and namaste.